Continuing production of The Open Mind has been made possible by grants from the Rosalind P. Walter Foundation, the Bluestein Family Foundation, the Joan Gans Cuny and Peter G. Peterson Fund, the Malkin Fund, the May and Samuel Rudin Family Foundation, the Joanne and Kenneth Wellner Foundation, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, and from the corporate community, Mutual of America. I'm Richard Heffner, your host on The Open Mind, and this is our second program with Commissioner Michael J. of the Federal Communications Commission. My guest now leaves the FCC after 2 terms in office, clearly with much to regret about what the Commission has and has not done to make certain that broadcasting in America functions truly in the public interest. So now let's pick up where we left off last time. Commissioner Copps, I'm delighted you stayed. I had the feeling, as I suggested at the end of the last program, that I wanted to talk about such things as the fairness doctrine, equal time, that you really felt that that was old hat. Let's not engage in that, or that you felt perhaps that it was futile to do so.
Let's have some separation here. The public interest is at the heart and soul of the Telecommunications Act, and the public interest is at the heart and soul of what we as a commission are supposed to be doing with our oversight of radio and television and the cable industry. So what we need now are policies that reflect the public interest in the 21st century. Part of the public interest is making sure that the media is open to a diversity of inputs. Part of the public interest is to make sure that the media is reflective of the different cultural contributions to communities of a license, so that everybody can be heard and that issues of interest to that community are being teed up in the programming. It's very, very important we have that. I think we should be focusing our discussion on how do we get that in the 21st century. I think probably if we just tee it up as should we bring back the fairness doctrine, which the FCC recently completed taking off the books. Everybody thought it was already dead and buried, but I guess they decided to bury it again just to make sure it was gone.
How did it do that, by the way? How did it bury it again?
I think the Commission went through some of the rules that it thought it had eliminated years ago, and this would have been eliminated, as you know, back in the 1980s, and found out that somebody had forgotten actually to take the pencil or the scissors or whatever they do to cut them out of the regulations, so they made sure that the scissors worked this time.
So much for fairness?
So much for the fairness doctrine, yes. I hope not for fairness. Because all of those things are important. So I want to bring back guidelines that are not onerous, but that are reflective of the public interest. I think that a station owner or a broadcaster has an obligation to go out in their community of license and talk to the people who live there about the kind of programming they want to see. We used to require that back when stations were locally owned, and the local station owner went to the barber shop, went to the bakery, went to the grocery store, knew his community was part of it. We still said you have to go out and talk to people, make sure you're hitting everybody and reflecting their interests. Now the station owner can be 2,000 miles away, and we said, don't worry, you don't have to do that anymore. So I think we have to have that kind of community discovery. I think we have to have something in our licensing system that is news-centric. I think that's our shortfall right now, is the shortfall in news and information, the lack of investigative journalism, the newsrooms that have been cut back as a result of consolidation and as a result of this bottom line quarterly report mentality that now drives stations. You know, it didn't used to be that way. There's a famous story about Bill Paley back in the early days of CBS, gathered all of his news folks around and said, I want you to go out and do the news. Don't worry about the cost. Don't worry about the money. I've got Jack Benny to do the entertainment on the network, and I'll take care of the rest. We don't have too many people with that kind of approach or telling their news people that now. We don't have that many news people to tell it to.
But that was before Don Hewitt proved that you didn't have to make news into a lost leader, that news could produce profit. And once that was known, how are you going to keep them down on the farm after that?
Well, now it's the profit leader rather than the loss leader. And, but we've paid an enormous price for that, and I think there are some signs that that kind of news is not, certainly it's not fulfilling its public interest obligations, and probably not meeting the expectations of a lot of people right now either, citizens.
But when the news does appear, do you feel that there's no room for fairness and a fairness doctrine?
Of course there's room for fairness. There has to be fairness.
But not
there
a
has to be
doctrine.
diversity of... I think if we bring back something that was passed or initiated, I should say, back in the 50s or whenever it was, 60s, a long time ago, in exactly that guise, we're never going to get any public interest kind of responsibility back. So, as I say, I don't want it to be onerous. I would be the first to say that the fairness doctrine, as it existed at the time, was not as onerous as it remains in people's memories and some broadcasters' memories right now. I mean, the fairness doctrine never required that every viewpoint be reflected in programming, or that everybody would have access to it, and it left a good bit of discretion to the broadcaster. Yet there are some of the old-time independent broadcasters whose opinion I respect, who would tell me it had a chilling effect on what they did. Now, I wasn't there. I don't know if that's true or false, but I don't want something that has a chilling effect on their innovation and doing what they do. But I do think we have to have guidelines that make sure that we tee up a diversity of programming for the people, and that we reflect local communities, local cultures. And I think we've got a problem going beyond localities. As you know, the FCC does not regulate networks per se, but I think we have, if you talk about lack of news and investigative journalism, that's as much a network problem as a local news problem, not more so. I mean, it's interesting, people will say now, well, look at all the news we have right now compared to what we had 30 or 40 years ago, all these outlets. And I usually say, you know, I remember the first news I saw on TV, which was probably back in 1947 or 48 on our little 7-inch Motorola television set in black and white. It was John Cameron Swayze doing the evening news. John Cameron Swayze had a bureau in London, a bureau in Paris, a bureau in Rome, a bureau in Tokyo, a bureau in Bonn, and bureaus all around the world with people staffing those bureaus. Where are those network bureaus right now? Most of them don't exist. If they do, Stringer comes in on a lot of them to cover the programs. You don't know if you have a trustworthy news source or not. So quaint as those days may have seemed, in some ways they were producing better news back then. And I can't tell you how much I feel that having these kind of guidelines in the books would make a difference, because I've talked to a lot of folks like Walter Cronkite and Marvin Kalm and Ted Koppel and Dan Rather, people were there, who said it made a difference back then when they knew that there was somebody watching, that there was an FCC that was watching and that at least had the potential to take action, whether they took it or not. At least we talked about it. At least we talked about it as a public value. And now that's gone. We've got to get back to that sort of arrangement where people who are given free use of the airways and an opportunity to make a wonderful living, and who in many cases do a wonderful job. I'm not the anti-broadcast guy at all. I love broadcasting. And I think there are lots of small and independent broadcasters still out there in whose breasts the fire of the public interest continues to burn brightly. But in this marketplace in which we live, with its unforgiving expectations, it's more and more difficult for those people to do their job. It's almost impossible for them to do their job. Until we learn to say no to some of these mega mergers, and until we get back to a way to express the public interest and have a licensing regime that makes a difference. Until we do that, we're going to continue on this slide to less and less news, and this slide that dumbs down too many issues at a cost, as I said before, that this democracy cannot afford to pay.
But I want to find out from you what you mean by guidelines, phrase you've used. You don't want limit free speech? What do you mean by guidelines?
No, I don't want to limit free speech, but I think it's perfectly legitimate for the FCC to say, well, what proportion of your money, are you investing in some proportion of your money into the news? Is it going up or going down? Have you closed a news bureau have you closed your news operation since you were in for a license last time?
Mr.
Have you expanded it?
Mr. Commissioner, I closed my news bureau. So what? What do you have to do with that?
Well,
now, what do you do when somebody says that to you?
I've been at the FCC for 10 years, and we have not taken away a license on public interest grounds in that entire time, nor for the 20 years preceding my arrival.
Is that
there.
good or bad?
That's awful.
You mean
That's
you
terrible.
should have swatted someone?
If people cannot use the license that they are given to benefit the public interest, I say use it or lose it. Take it away and give it to somebody who will use it, of course.
Well, Commissioner, I've been using it, and my ratings for my reality programs are stupendous. Look at that, and think of the money I'm making. Now, how can you say I'm not serving some public's interest?
I can serve you a bowl of spinach and a Big Mac here, and you're probably going to take the Big Mac.
Absolutely.
Right.
And what business is it of the
It's
FCC?
not very good for your health.
But what good is it? What business is it of the FCC?
I think it's the business of the FCC because the FCC is responsible for overseeing the stewardship of the airwaves. The airwaves belong to the American people. It's a public resource. There's not an airwave in the United States of America that belongs to any company, any special interest, or any individual.
Okay, and when I don't do what you think or what the commission thinks, sitting en banc, and it's a unanimous vote, what do? You take away my license?
That's what I said, yes.
But the commission itself had never done that, or had done
Very
it
seldom.
very seldom.
You'll remember the case in the civil rights.
Red Line.
No, the broadcasting
In the
case
South.
WBLT or
Yeah.
whatever it was. But we took that away only when then not Supreme Court Justice, but Circuit Judge Warren Berger ordered us to take that license away. We kept refusing. No, we're not going to take it away. It might be segregationists. They might be cutting off the Martin Luther King news and all of that stuff. And finally he said, take the license away. After about 3 times, we finally did that.
And then Red Lion,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing. What makes you think the commission would do it, could do it, within the framework of our constitutional system?
We need 3 votes at the commission to enforce a statute that Congress constitutionally passed and the president constitutionally signed and is part of the law of the land. The term public interest, convenience, and necessity, I had my staff look this up years ago, and I forget the exact number. It appears like 112 or 115 times in the statute. When Congress tells me something, I used to work in the Hill, if Congress tells me something 115 times, I think they're probably serious about it.
And now Congress isn't telling you that.
I think well, it's the law. They don't have to tell me that. That's
But
the
you tell
law
me
of
that
the land.
But you tell me that the law is ignored. You're describing this god-awful
I'm
situation.
saying that is the law and that the law should be enforced, and you need 3 votes to commission to enforce the law. And I think the only way we're going to get to that is with some public pressure, people saying enforce the law and do something about the kind of broadcasting that I'm being fed back in my community of license.
What do you think the High Court would do with that now? I'm not talking about the Berger Court.
I'm not going to make any predictions, but I don't think that has to be the thing that scares us away from serving the public interest. I think if I do my job and implement the law, and I take an oath to implement the law, the statute, not my own personal opinions, but the statute, I think if we do that, then I'll take no chances, and I might get turned back. But in the meantime, I'm going to do what I think is right. I'm going to do what I think the law compels me to do, and hope in the final analysis that it will turn out all right in the courts.
You know, I'm the last person in the world to rain on that parade. Yet I guess I'm so discouraged by what I see. And I read your speeches, and I know that you're absolutely right, that there has been an abandonment of this cause for 30 years. And I have to ask myself, why does he think it's going to be reversed?
Well, I think it can be. I think the licensing guidelines that I've talked about, we could put those together and promulgate them tomorrow with a vote at the commission. Doesn't depend upon the president signing anything. Doesn't depend upon Congress passing any new legislation. We have the authority to do that.
It does depend upon the president nominating commissioners who will do that, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And the Senate approving them.
Right. Well, we've got a couple of new commissioners. I'll be working to proselytizing among them. What
do you think is going to happen? Seriously.
With regard to this whole issue of the future of media?
To the whole issue.
I think inevitably we're going to have the discussion that I'm talking about having as a country. The media is changing so rapidly. The technology of it is changing. The internet is going to play an ever more important role in how media is produced and how media is disseminated amongst the people. So I don't think you can avoid it. And I think there is a feeling abroad in many people in the land. I'm not saying it's 85% of the American people, but I think there are millions and millions of people in the United States who understand that the news and information infrastructure that we have right now is not serving them well. That we are not getting the information and news and depth that we need. And this is not a partisan issue wherever I go. And I've been over the 10 years, I guess, probably to 100 town meetings around the country. 1 o'clock in the morning, some of them go 8, 9 hours to 1 o'clock in the morning, and you'll have a hall filled with 300, 400 people with an open mic saying something is wrong and we need to change. That's why we got the 3 million letters that I referenced earlier with regard to when Chairman Powell tried to loosen the ownership rules. And I think that concern is out there. Things can change pretty quick in a country. The political landscape can change pretty quickly. You're seeing a little bit of that right now with some of the demonstrations going on, and I'm
What do you think? Do you think there's going to be a connection drawn between the 99, not 999, but the 99 and 1, and the issue that you're talking about? Is it all part of the same thing?
I think that the country is in sufficiently dire straits that we are going to have an era of reform, more significant reform in some of these issues in the years ahead than we have had in the past. I think events will probably compel it. Unless we have solutions to some of these problems that are confronting the country right now. And I think people will understand that to get on top of those problems, whether they're job creation or environmental control or energy dependence or health insurance or creating equal opportunity for people, that we have to have some kind of better understanding of those currents out there than we have right now. But it is interesting to note that a little movement like this pops up like we've had in the last several weeks. And talk about the polls, I got to take the polls, and a lot of people think there's nothing wrong with that. That's maybe they're onto something. So you have to be very careful in predicting the future of the American people. You have to be very careful about saying, well, we're never gonna change.
You have a kind of populist streak to you, don't you?
Yeah, I think was Mary Baker Eddy raise less corn and more hail. I think that's kind of the essence of populism. I think the American people have a populist heritage to draw on, progressive heritage to draw upon, and I think it's time that that comes forward.
And your feeling obviously is that consolidation hasn't done the kind of damage to our understanding and our needs and our feelings that would preclude that understanding from being effective.
Well, it's done a lot of damage, but I think there's still an understanding out there in spite of the awful damage that consolidation has inflicted, in spite of the dereliction of public interest responsibility that the Federal Communications Commission has displayed over the last 30 or 40 years. Yeah, there's still something inside of people that responds to the need of reform, the need for fairness, the need for equity. Yes.
But you don't want to deal with the fairness doctrine.
I want to deal with the public interest and equity and fairness. I don't want to bring back something that's written 50 or 60 years ago and fight about that, because that just derails us from having the discussion that we need to have about what is the proper media policy for the 21st century in a media environment that's substantially different than it was then. Not only the radio and the television, but broadband and the internet too.
Is Section 315A still in effect? Equal time?
It is still, Section 315 is the expression of the public interest, equal time, yes.
Is what's happened in terms of the debates that we see? I mean, I know that all the candidates aren't there, and the requirement that I remember that every legally qualified candidate be given if others are given, or be sold if others are sold, equal time. What's happened to that? Where's the FCC there?
Well, I don't think we've had anything before us, particularly on that issue right now. That's a difficult question when you start talking about debates like that. If you have 50 candidates, I guess, or 60 candidates step up to be heard on the debate.
But the law, I gather, is still on the books.
Section 315 is on the books, yes.
And the equal time
with the kind of granularity that you're talking about. No, I think it's a more general approach.
So that you're not concerned about. Well, I shouldn't put it that way. I should ask you what your concern.
I think broadcasters have a responsibility. I think media has a responsibility to be inclusive and to offer opportunities for the expression of diverse points of view.
What about
whether
candidates?
that means, pardon?
What about candidates? What about the debates? Are you happy with what's happened to these seemingly formal debates? Does it conform to what you think should be the FCC policy?
Well, what's happened in debates and what the FCC policy is probably two different questions. I think the debates have just kind of degenerated into, this is purely personal opinion, a lot of political theater and gotcha kind of politics. I hope they're informing the American people. It's good that people watch debates. I guess any debates. We can all wish for higher quality debates, but again, we don't dictate content or influence the content of those debates.
Let me ask you one thing, because I know we don't have much time left. The recent indecency question and this whole business of fining CBS for I don't even know how to call it. I didn't see it, but a brief glimpse, I gather, of less than a second of female nudity seems to have gotten the FCC in an uproar.
I think the whole indecency regime is kind of in question right now. The Supreme Court is hearing a couple of cases having to do with indecency. Nobody knows how they're going to decide. They could decide it on very narrow grounds, or they could cast their net more widely to include some of the broader indecency decisions, Pacifica, or even go to something as broadly important as the Red Lion case, which supports a lot of the public interest things that we do. But indecency, again, is part of the Telecommunications Act. It's part of the statute. You take an oath to enforce the statute, so it is still there. The court has said that the commission, insofar as this so-called fleeting indecency went, had not given adequate notice to broadcasters that fleeting indecency might be as actionable as something that was less than fleeting and longer lasting. So that's kind of the question that's up there. But in practically speaking, in putting the brakes on the fleeting indecency right now, and while this is all in abeyance, it's pretty much slowed down indecency decision-making at the Commission until we find out which way the Supreme Court is going to head.
Any indication at all in
No.
terms of past judgments by this court?
No.
What would you like to have happen?
I think there is room to have an approach toward indecency that during those hours when children are watching discourages the kind of indecency that a lot of people find offensive. I also happen to think that some of the violence, although this has never been included under the indecency, some of the gratuitous and kind of sickening violence is probably not something that's advisedly shown to kids during those hours. There's plenty of other opportunities for that. So I'm not saying out with the regime. It's still part of the law.
Whatever is part of the law, there it is. Thank you so much for joining me again, Commissioner Copps.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be on.
And thanks too to you in the audience. I hope you join us again next time. Meanwhile, as an old friend used to say, good night and good luck. And do visit the Open Mind website at 13.org/openmind to reprise this program online right now, or to draw upon our archive of 1,500 or so other Open Mind and related programs. That's 13.org/openmind. Continuing production of The Open Mind has been made possible by grants from the Rosalind P. Walter Foundation, the Bluestein Family Foundation, the Joan Gans Cuny and Peter G. Peterson Fund, the Malkin Fund, the May and Samuel Rudin Family Foundation, the Joanne and Kenneth Wellner Foundation, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, and from the corporate community, Mutual of America.